And go. Hello, Shrewiverse, and welcome back to the Shakespearean Shrew. I am your Shakespearean Shrew, Karen Feiner, professor from the University of Oklahoma and lover of all things Bard. This podcast is a decorum be damned entrance into understanding Shakespeare's stages, for there are many. Today, we are talking to actor Daniel DeYoung.
Hello.
So, we're so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Hello.
We actually met a few weeks back because I went to see As You Like It with Independent Shakespeare Company's Shakespeare in the Park in Griffith Park in LA. And you were Amiens.
Yes.
Who is usually kind of on the smaller side in terms of a role. Mm-hmm. And yet I got there and there was a whole free Amiens pre-show procedure going on. And so I'm really excited about that. I had so much fun with it. And I wanted to talk with you a little bit about what adding that aspect did, you think, in terms of the show or creating more of a connection between the actors and the audience.
Yes. Good question. It adds, I find, a lot, especially with younger audience members. I tend to attract a lot of kids. It also gives an opportunity, particularly for those younger audience members and others, for me to quite literally explain somebody to explain in plain terms the plot leading up to the beginning of the play. So things that they might miss, like, okay, here's what's happening. There's a duke. He was deposed by his brother. And then X, Y, and Z happen. And that's why we're all here. And I have had people come up to me after and say, thank you, I understood exactly what was going on because you explained it to me and made it fun.
That's such a smart idea, and I didn't even think about that aspect of it because a lot of times when I'm talking to people, I was actually just talking to my sister, and she's like, I listened to your podcast, and it makes me want to go see Shakespeare, but then I hear somebody say something in early modern English from your podcast, and I think, better not. And that makes me so sad, but the fact that you can explain the plot a little bit to people so they don't feel like they're going to get lost gives you a whole nother role that I didn't even really consider.
And I hadn't until we started, and I was like, oh, I'm actually helping set people up so we can knock them out of the park, so to speak. Also, I would tell your sister or other people that are afraid that generally when you go to see at least, people who kind of know what they're doing Shakespeare, you'll have maybe 10 minutes where your ear is tuning, but once you're tuned in, you get it. Like the audience is still laughing, they still follow the plot, it's happening, but there's maybe a little bit, there's like 5 minutes of discomfort where you're tuning your ear, and then boom, then you're locked in. That's what I would tell your sister.
And I love that you mentioned tuning because you're also one of the major musicians in what is a very musical production. Well, As You Like It is already quite the musical production as it is, but
Musical.
I think it was still one of the most musical productions I've ever seen. And also a musician, is it something that you just happen to do and were able to incorporate into your character?
Yes. In my life, I focused on the actor training in my life. But yes, music has always been my side friend.
Side hustle.
My side hustle. I picked up a guitar at a young age. It's actually one of the reasons that I'm so in line with the ISC, the Independent Shakespeare, because the creator of the company, one of the two creators, David Melville, is very similar to me in that respect. He's a actor first, but loves doing music stuff. And it's how I have gotten my foot in the door in a lot of companies, actually.
You're like, I am multifaceted.
I
Yes.
am multifaceted. And if you're auditioning for a Shakespeare company, 9 out of 10 times they're gonna need a guitar dude in the forest in some capacity or other.
Best description ever.
Yes. And, and I'm sure you know this about Shakespeare. Probably your listeners maybe do or don't, but Shakespeare heavily incorporated music into every production. Tragedy, comedy, history. The when he built his space, the Blackfriars, they had to do something when they were trimming the wicks and the candles, and they played music, and they had to do things when people were coming in, and they played music. They would play stuff from their time, and also, as you know, and people didn't have access to music in their homes. You couldn't, unless they played an instrument or knew somebody that did. You couldn't just pop on a record or pop on your iPad or whatever. So you had to experience music. It was a thing you had to go do, and Shakespeare understood the power of it. So there is not a Shakespeare play that doesn't benefit from having music.
And he incorporates it so well. He's
Yeah.
one of the ones from that time period, because I've taught many from that time period.
Hmm.
And he's one of the few that incorporates the music into the storyline, where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, it's not somebody random just coming out and playing
Right.
something, but it's actually part of the story. He's turning it into a joke, or he's doing something with it, as opposed to just, and now we shall play something.
Right, right. And he speaks about it a lot in many of his plays. And he was obviously very moved by music. I mean, Orsino exists, so,
Right.
so we know how he felt about music.
How many productions have you done with ISC up as of now?
ISD in particular, I mean, a lot. Over the years, I mean, I've been with them for maybe around 10 years. So, a lot of their indoor, their studio productions I've done. I've done a few summers. The outdoor productions. Probably dozens. I don't. I don't know.
I was just curious because it's just so engaged with the community. That's one company where almost every weekend there's something on the books in terms of registering to vote, or creating meals for the homeless population, or doing like a fun combat family thing where they teach you stage fighting or something like that. I've seen so many different things brought in where it's community involvement. And so when I was there, and of course, I was one of the kids who came over to listen to you in your little cell sing. But then, we played a little kind of roll out where we had to distract the guard and free you. And I saw a guy coming with a German Shepherd, and I was like, oh, look, a German Shepherd. Because, of course, I'm always distracted by dogs.
Me too.
Thought it would work for the guard, too.
Yeah.
It did. And then, instead of somebody from our group coming up to let you out, the owner of the dog, so this random guy in the community with his girlfriend and his dog, he's the one who came up and let you out.
I remember that was great. Oh my gosh, we were tickled by that. That was great.
It was amazing. I was like, just random guy. Hi.
Yeah. Hello, sir.
But it just showed how far the reach of the company is in terms of random people just walking into it and becoming part of it, even if it's just for a moment. So what makes it so different? Is it just the LA community? Is it something that ISC is doing, you think? Because I was looking around, and like you said, there were so many kids. There were so many different people there. It was so diverse, and it was, to see the kids laughing and understanding, maybe not the nuances, but they got the jokes, they got pieces of it, and they enjoyed themselves. And I took a picture of these three little kids who were just kind of up front and center watching raptly. And I couldn't get away from that feeling of awe.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to see what you thought. What makes ISC so successful in connecting to their community?
It's a good question. I think, in my particular experience in Shakespeare companies I've worked for, they all, and having started theater companies and etc., you have to, it is a prerequisite. You have to have community engagement. You have to integrate yourself into the community somehow. You must do that, or you will be doomed to fail. Because quite literally, it's an in-person event. It's live. It's not just a TV show. And I've seen companies, will just kind of do not the bare minimum, but like, we're here and we'll help your businesses, and like your big festivals like Oregon Shakespeare Festival that helps the hotel, helps the gas station, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like ISC took a saturated market, which Los Angeles, but found the thing that it doesn't have, which is that kind of community connection associated with a professional theater company. So they do that on steroids, like times 100, in a way I have never seen. And Melissa and David's vision evolved. I literally saw them when I was in high school as a 15-year-old do a performance in a shed for 4 people. I was one of the people in the shed.
A performance of what? That's awesome.
For 4 people. And they were amazing. Actually, one of the things that made me want to work with them was that they gave it everything. It was an incredible performance. They destroyed it. And I was, as a kid, I was like, oh my God. So in doing the community engagement, you are growing your brand, to put it kind of crassly, but providing a service that this community needs so bad, authentic connection, providing that authentic connection that this city needs so terribly bad. And they have found a way to do it. It's taken a lot. And their business model, donation-based, very hard, makes every week a challenge for them. Makes it, are we going to survive? But what it does is, in the short term, it makes, are we going to survive? But in the long term, you can weather things like COVID, the lockdowns. You can keep audiences there in the long term. So very smart in that way. Although, I can hear business people, what are you talking about? You don't have to pay for a service? Like, what is this?
No, and it's amazing because I don't know many Shakespeare companies that are still able to do free Shakespeare. I can't actually name any except for off the top of my head, and I've been to quite a few of them.
Yeah, I can't think of one. No, I can't.
No, the only thing I know is, there's a couple that have free readings of Shakespeare, so they'll do dramatic readings, but
yeah,
it's not a full-fledged production like what you all have, and it doesn't. It's just a full production. It is a full production, all the bells and whistles, and I think that's also what brought in so many people, and is that it's accessible. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of asking to give what people can give, but that's a lot different than saying you have to buy a ticket at the door, and if you can't pay, you can't come in.
That's right. Yes, they do have to lay that on thickly because they do need to make something. But,
yes.
That's like the price you have to pay is the curtain speech.
Right. Where you're like, okay,
That's a small price to pay, you know.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's always that awkward moment where you're like, please give us money.
Yeah.
But
But like,
look,
yeah.
didn't you have fun?
Yeah.
Wasn't this amazing?
Yes. Yes.
So, and it was absolutely amazing. I sent an email afterwards to Sabrina, and I was just like, my face hurt so bad from laughing after that. Like, oh man, it was I've seen 3 As You Like It's just this year. And I've got one more. There seems to be like a pattern
Yes.
where
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
like everyone's like, we're gonna do As You Like It this year.
Yeah.
Great. And then Macbeth is the other one this year that seems to be everywhere. But it's always interesting that there's just a pattern of plays. But this one, so like hands down, from all of the ones that I've seen of As You Like It, was my favorite.
Well, this is my 4th production of As You Like It in my life. So, and I think, well, I don't know who's going to be listening, but it's definitely got, yeah, as you said, the most wow factor in regards to the sheer amount of laughter and delight that I have. I'm not taking away from the other companies or places that I have worked at. They have been great in different ways, but this is definitely, ISC tends to go broad. Let's
Yes.
put it that way. They tend to go broad.
When if you look at any of the pictures that have been posted from other actors who are in the production, there's a lot of like Twilight pictures that have been posted, and you just sit there and look at it, and even from afar, it looks magical.
It is.
And I think that, I was hiking up there and I was just like, man, this is the hike. Like I had my Lyft driver drop me off way too far away. But I got there and I was like, oh, I am in the Forest of Arden. Okay, let's go.
Doesn't that hike, it kind of is your transitional, your liminal experience into the Twilight Zone, so to speak, into the Forest of Arden. Or sorry, out of the Twilight Zone, because Twilight's in between, into the Forest of Arden. It gives you time to acclimate to literally the forest, and that's a cool thing about that space that they're using right now, which is a transition space, as I'm sure you're aware, is that space is in the round. The way they've set it up, David, again, he's brilliant. He does everything. He came up with the music, the ideas. He wrote songs for the play. He directed the plays. Touchstone. He production manages. Tech for him
Oh
is
my gosh.
very, very. Yeah, he's like a polymath. He's like, oh, I'm acting. Oh, but I have to help with this like source 4 light over here, and he's what is it called? An actor as manager, which is actually an old model. As I'm sure you're aware. Sorry, I got off track. But yes, the thing that he building the stage on the little gulch there and having, the Duke Sr. be able to say, books in the running brooks, and like, there's a brook, sermons in stones. Oh, look at that big stone. It's very, very magical.
It was a perfect location. And then leaving was so interesting because I talked to a few of you afterwards, and then so I was leaving, and there were a few people who kind of also were straggling behind. And we were all just talking to each other and talking about the production. And I made friends with these random people who were from Virginia. And I was just like, okay, like this is, but again, it just, for me, really solidified that idea of you come in as different people, you have this shared experience, and you walked away. I mean, I still don't know those people, but I'm just like, and we were friends for those moments.
Those moments. Yeah, I would say maybe it's the extra hike, but I'm definitely experiencing a lot of alchemy in this production. A lot of audience transformation and what's the term they use? Theater is medicine is the term that people use sometimes.
It's been very cathartic.
Yes. Yeah. To transform your your people's thoughts and feelings. You start somewhere, you go through the experience together, and come out the other end. Which is kind of the idea. In Athens they used to shut down the city, so that everyone could go to the theater and have their medicinal experience.
Yeah.
It might have been different then. We're definitely not doing the Greeks at ISC.
Well, so on your LinkedIn profile, yeah, I did some background research, but there was classics with a modern edge was the description of your focus of your work. It said classics with a modern edge. So I was kind of curious as to, I love that you're like, I don't even remember.
Well, that's good. Whoever wrote that. I had the right idea.
And I was just wondering like what that meant, but maybe you don't remember what that meant anymore.
No, I think I still got it. Yeah, I think when I went into the idea of this kind of life and lifestyle when I was younger, I had this idea that I could through learning and training and etc. take the classics, which is my favorite thing to do, is the Shakespeares and things like that, with a couple other people in there sometimes, but it's my obviously I'll do anything, but this was my favorite stuff to do is this, but take it and make it for modern audiences and make it feel modern. What's interesting about Shakespeare is that in making it, this is hard to explain, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. If you come at it straight ahead from the text itself, doing it hard as best as possible, making it understandable, and just doing the things you need to do to make the text understandable, it makes itself modern. It hits the audience. The poetry hits the audience, whether they necessarily understand it in that moment or not, even on a subconscious level. And it makes it modern, makes it feel modern. And the productions that are less successful, in my opinion, are when you put stuff on top of it, and you're like, I don't know, in outer space or something. I don't know, maybe there's a great production of As You Like It in Outer Space.
We shouldn't hate on it.
But then in doing it and giving service to it, it makes it modern. That's the modern edge right there.
Well, and I think that's so important because a lot of times, like you said, people try to make it modern by doing something like putting it in outer space.
Making it modern.
Yes. And, even my, back to my poor sister, she's going to be like, why am I all over this podcast today? But she's like, can't we just change up the language? And I was like, oh, no, dear sister, we cannot. But and I think you're right, though, if the actors really know what they're saying and can convey that and make themselves understood to an audience, that's the thing, because then as an audience, you will understand them. And again, maybe not every single thing they say, but you'll get the point.
Yeah.
It's the same reason that I don't teach Shakespeare in my classes with having them read a play.
Thank goodness for you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Where we need you.
Well, and I always feel so bad because whenever I'm talking to people and I'm like, what was your first experience with Shakespeare? And they were like, well, my freshman year, I read Romeo and Juliet or Midsummer Night's Dream, and I hated it. And I'm just like, yep. And, they might love it now, but they had to overcome an obstacle of dislike in order to get there. And I'm like, okay, teachers, we're doing it wrong. So, dear Shrewiverse, if you are a teacher, just know Shakespeare is not meant to be read, especially by young people.
No, no, that will kill the joy right there.
And that's the problem. And I think that's what their first experience killed the joy. And so for so many people, rather than it being, oh, I got this experience of Shakespeare and it was love at first sight. It was hatred at first sight. I hated him. And then eventually I came to understand and figured it out and then grew from loathing to loving. But it was this very long journey.
I think he would be really upset if he knew that like it was being used as like something to like slavishly like sit hunched over at a desk and read, and I don't
break down every word into what its modern counterpart.
Yeah. And just like you're like your brain hurts and you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's something to do if you're an actor and trying to figure out for you what those lines mean. Sure, break it down, pull it into little pieces. But as a high school student, I feel like you're breaking down Shakespeare into little pieces and then it's just rubble.
Rubble. Right. And it's very hard to convey, like, in that kind of setting. It's very hard to convey, like, no, don't you, like, this, like, he's writing for you. Like, this is I'm generalizing
Groundlings.
about high school. Yeah, the groundling. He's writing for you. This is a sex joke. I'm generalizing high school students, and I'm sorry. But, like, see, like, this is funny. Like this is, but you know, yeah, and this is also a highbrow joke, you know, like a couple pages later.
I know you're generalizing high school students, but then again, I also explained the sex joke thing to my boyfriend, and he was like, oh, I like him more.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you don't understand. He's writing for everyone. He's writing for you. He's writing for the people in the middle. He's writing for the lords and ladies. Right? Yeah.
But yes, so, but you know, that always cracks me up because once they watch it, I took my students to go see 12th Night, and my students came out and they go, Dr. Feiner, I get it. I got Shakespeare. I understood that.
Yay!
And an actor sat in my lap.
And that's right. It was experiential.
I was like, and that is the joy of live theater.
Yeah, it's experiential. And yes, and the companies that are, not to say that I haven't been in great productions that are more modern, but, and I'm sure you know this, Doctor, but productions that don't use original practices miss out on like a quarter of, you know, Shakespeare. Like,
yes.
If you're not doing direct address, you can't see the audience, et cetera, et cetera. It's gonna be tougher. It's gonna be harder. Not to say that I haven't seen them, you know, that are great productions that have done that, but in my opinion, companies that I've worked with that employ those methods, that it's always 10 times better.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
So, and you've studied all over the place in terms of learning not just, you know, how to act, but it seems like you've learned a lot about voice, and you've learned a lot about early modern theater in particular. So far as you went to the Globe to study, and you went to...
So I went to one of my schools, the Guthrie Theater actor training program. So one of the was it 6 months or something? They just sent us all out. They send you abroad to London, and they kind of set up a program where we got teachers from Lambda and RADA and the Globe and this school called LISPA, which is like a kind of movement, cool, kind of almost clowning if anybody from LISPA, I know you're not clowning, but it's very, very intense. So yeah, we got like 6 months of like very intensive training with a lot of different teachers in London.
Did being in London change your perspective of?
Yes, yes, yes. Well, because I mean, I learned innumerable things, but one of the main things I learned was that we had learned all this stuff that you need to learn, like about how to approach the text and the clues to look for and this and that. And of course, when you're first learning it and you're kind of at that phase, like you go into some new hotshot teacher or whatever, and you're like, well, look at all this cool stuff, and my antithesis is really great here. Look at all these plosive sounds that I'm pulling at. And one of the major things I think we learned was they were like, no, stop. Like, okay, let's put all that aside. Put all that aside. You've got it. And now let's work on you. Like, let's put you in here. Like,
Ooh.
Yeah. You yourself are in these imaginary circumstances. Be yourself. Put all that stuff aside and just do it. Was one of the major lessons, and how to put yourself in those imaginary circumstances. The other thing I learned was that we saw this production at Royal Shakespeare Company, and there were some not so good ones, but they did one, I think, at the Swan of Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3. They just did them in order. It was a couple days, and man, it was the best thing I had seen to date. It was like when I learned the potential of Shakespeare, and it was histories, and it was like watching action movies. The line to the guy's restroom was longer than the women's. What does that tell you? The guys were like, "Oh my god," or like.
But it's so funny because the Old Globe in San Diego is doing Henry VI Part 2. I think that's still going. And they turned it into 2 parts. So they did Part 1 and Part 2, and they took out, like, they merged Part 3 kind of into all of it.
They're doing Henry VI Part 2, 1 and 2? Or they're doing...
So they turned Henry VI into a 2-parter instead of a 3-parter.
So it's... I see. Of all of them, I thought it was Henry VI Part 2, but Part 1 of Henry VI Part 2.
You're like, what did they do?
What did they do? No, that makes more sense. There
were some parts where you were like, wait,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, Lady Grey is on stage and she has 2 twins at the end and standing next to Edward, and you're like, where did she come from?
Where did she come from?
What?
Who is she?
Does anybody else know who she is? But overall.
Yes. That's a thing when people are like, no one's going to come see the histories. They're so boring. I'm like, no, it's like an action movie. They get up and they're like, no, can I curse? I'm sorry. They're like,
yes, oh, absolutely.
Like, no, fuck you, because you fucking killed him. Well, I'll fucking kill you. And then she comes out. She's like, well, then they have a bad... It's great. Yeah, sorry.
It is like the fight choreography is always...
Oh, it's got to be great.
It's like a ballet of violence. And you're like, who doesn't like a ballet of violence?
Yeah. It is totally Game of Thrones, before Game of Thrones. And that's what I learned. I learned the potential, because those are some of his earlier works. And so the language is a little more straightforward, a little more blocky, a little more, which is fine, because it's still Shakespeare. It's still like, it's not like, it's not him. Sorry.
There's one play that I would say, it's Shakespeare, but it's early Shakespeare, and that is Two Gentlemen. That is the one where I'm like, there are those pieces where you can kind of peek through and see the greatness that will be.
Yeah.
But that is the one for me, and I teach it every time I teach Shakespeare's comedies, because I'm like, okay, it wasn't always good. It wasn't always like...
Oh God, that ending, yeah.
Oh my God. All of my female students get done reading and they're like, what just happened? Yes, exactly. What the fuck? And you're just like, Yes, let's talk about this.
Yeah, and it's not one of those that you can write off like Titus or something, another early one where you're like, well, it's just gratuitous. Well, it's like, no, that it's just cringe.
Yes. Where it's just like, oh, yeah, no. It's always one that comes to mind whenever I'm just like, oh, it wasn't all greatness and glory. But that's okay because again, I always teach it to my students because you can see the pieces and you can see how the pieces will come together later in his career and create such amazing comedies. And then As You Like It, it's not even my favorite comedy, although seeing it on stage always changes my mind for that moment, just because plot wise it is not one of his finest plots.
Well, as we know, Shakespeare, his strongest suit is not his plots, and I think we all know that. I think we can all agree.
And As You Like It, it's just like, we're just gonna get rid of everybody who's a problem in this play. Like, anyone who doesn't fit, you're either gonna get converted and just disappear into the night, or like you're gonna have a near-death experience and completely change your ways.
And we won't even see it.
Yeah, exactly. Or Jagwees, he's just such, he's a killjoy. We're just going to send him off to follow the ex-king. I think it's fine.
Right, it'll be great. Yeah, or we'll just not do anything to advance the plot. We'll just dally around and
just hang
fun.
out in the forest.
We'll fun and hang out.
Until everyone gets married. It's fine.
Yeah. It's been fun and interesting playing Corin also because like he serves, it's like very little, he comes out and he's like, I guess this is kind of for the plot. You can buy this place, and then, well, he serves no more purpose, but here's a couple scenes about sheep. You want a monologue about sheep? Isn't that what you came here for?
And you guys created that amazing song where she's picking up
the goat
sheep,
food.
the goat shit. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was like, what is happening right now? But it is so pastoral, but so the farce of it, the humor of it, which I feel like we all are fairly certain he intended, because
Yes.
he lived in the country. He was like, why are you all idealizing
Yes.
living with a bunch of sheep?
That is yes, the pastoral. Yeah, he's skewering them, which is so funny. Yet for like there are things, as we know, like as a modern audience, that it's going to be hard to convey and hard to get. Like that part of As You Like It is like a cutting, like cutting the other plays at the time, the other literature. He's making fun of a pastoral. How do you explain that to someone? I don't know. Like maybe by inserting a goat poop song.
I mean, it worked like a charm. I was sold.
Yeah. Yes. And the making Audrey not just a puppet. I have been in numerous productions where we're kind of like, what do you do with her? Like she's not just Touchstone's puppet.
Yes, which I really like.
Yeah, she's her own lady, and you get why they're together, and she matches his wit and his humor, and they have this weird sexual stuff, that matches that they match each other. And everybody, when David was directing, he was like, I want, I don't want any, what's the really easy word? Negative, condescending. No. I want it pure. I want, like, the love is real. It's magical, pure. It's joy. Like, we're going to take it straight on. We're not going to put any cutting edge on it. Like,
which is interesting, because usually
he does. Yeah. Well,
and usually, I describe some of his relationships like, matchsticks soaked in gasoline, just waiting for a light, where you're like, oh, they're going to get married. This is a great decision. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Like the end, Hymen from heaven really comes down, for real comes down. And it's like, no, we're just having a magical moment. And it's a God, and it's pure, and it's love, and that's what we need in the world right now. Like that was kind of his idea on that.
And can we just decide, this is the first female hymen that I have seen, and I was just like, yes, and I'm just like, you're the first person to pick up on that and put that on the stage. I was.
Seems pretty obvious.
But so either people just take hymen out because they're just like, this is
I don't know
weird.
what's with this. Yeah, I don't know.
Or it's a guy, and then you're just like, and now I'm just uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes, I have been in one of those. But yes, she's a goddess. Like the lights change, like the whole thing happens.
Oh man, even the song at the end. I don't know if David wrote that song for that song. And it's funny because it is another moment where it's like, hey, we did this, this is free, but please help us, help us keep it free. But at the same time, that song was beautiful and the lyrics were amazing. And I was like, wow, this is just, again, it sounds ridiculous when I keep saying magical, but I can't think of a better word at this point in time. But as the audience member, you're just sitting there, and I don't know, it's a little bit of awe shows up because it's like you said, the lighting changes, the mood shifts, and it brings everything together and kind of brings everything home.
Very interesting. As you like it, I like it. I guess it is literally about a ton of outsiders.
Yes, and it's just, you're just sitting there and you're going, okay. Because in every other play, you can kind of pick your outsiders. Where you're like, all right, this person's obviously the outsider. This person's obviously the outsider. This person's the fool. This person's the monster. Mm-hmm. Merchant of Venice, Shylock, okay. The Jew, obviously, got it, okay. And as you like it, you're like, so who's the insider here?
Is there an insider?
Who's the us? Because it seems like the us is the them. Yeah. And I'm confused now. And so, that's what I talk about a lot there is that, with monsters in general, we think of boundaries and we think of us and them. And Shakespeare he flipped the script on us and was like, okay, the them, the people who have been expelled, they're actually the us. They're the people you're going to get to know. They're the people that you're going to become part of and want to be part of. And they're the people at the end who are going to, reclaim that position. But they never go back to the city. They get it back. You find out via word of mouth. Mm-hmm. But that's it.
Yeah, you don't see them go back. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like,
they did or not is,
City. I don't know about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe their rustic revelry just keeps carrying on and on.
The other big part, and so this is always a fun conversation because mimesis or mimesis, I've heard it said so many different ways, is such a big part of theater, and yet it's such a squirrely term even to pronounce. And it's definitely squirrely to teach. And so I was wondering if you were ever taught formally about mimetic structures in theater or anything like that, or if that was something where it was kind of like, you're doing it, you don't really need to know what it is.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's more of the latter. I definitely, when you wrote to me about it, I had to look it up. I was like, what the hell's going on here?
What are these words?
Yeah. And then, when I was kind of looking into it, and I was like, how does that apply to the things I've done in my life and like what I've done? So can you give me your definition of it then? Like
absolutely.
How you feel about it?
So I feel like there's a couple different definitions of mimesis that are floating around. And the one that I tend to stick with is Michael Davis's, where he talks about mimesis as transformation, where you are imitating to transform. And so in theater, the idea is it's never real, but it's always transformative in that it can create something that is interpreted as real. Your response to theater, the audience response that you see each night when you go perform, that's the mimetic structure where they're responding to something that they know isn't real. It's on a stage. They went to see a show, and yet their response to it is transformative in a way that suggests a reality to it. Does that make sense? I'm like, oh.
Well, okay, I see your point here. Yeah, my misty woo woo interpretation of that I call alchemy. That's my that's my misty woo woo.
When you said that term, I was like, huh, that's
Yes. Right. I guess when I was like mimetic, I was like, is that how closely to life? Like we on the stage like are setting it? Like is it, you know? And I feel like that's also going to change, you know, per writer, like or per what kind of production you're watching. I mean, Shakespeare wrote in a time where the idea of not doing original practices as we know them, the lights on with direct address, et cetera, would have been a foreign concept to them. Like there was no idea that a theater could be done another way.
right.
Just like the same way that thinking about like a TV would be like mind blowing to them. I think the same thing for the theater. So when you get, you know, the time goes by and things like Chekhov and the fourth wall are very clear boundary. I think that's a very different kind of mimesis. Am I using it? A very different kind of alchemy, a very different kind of mimesis, because and you know if you're seeing a play that is modern or like you know maybe a kitchen sink drama, you're getting further, your Arthur Millers, etc., where there's very clearly a fourth wall and you are just a voyeur. That's going to make a different kind of transformation in the audience, in my opinion, just based on the stuff I've done as an observer. It's going to make a different kind of transformation because you're not as much of an active, as a performer, you're not as much of an active part of the transformation. You aren't checking in with the audience constantly.
I absolutely agree. That's actually part of my thing is because what Shakespeare did, and as you said, it was so new, it was so different than what had ever been done before. That's my focus on him in terms of him being able to create a community in terms of his audience and their relation to one another, but also their relationship to the actors and the content of the play. So that's...
Which raises a good point, because for some reason, and it's hard for me to put words to it, it would feel weird if, like, you came to watch, like, The Seagull or something, and, like, then afterwards they were like, and register to vote, and here's a tote bag with community, you know, and, like, come join our players in the park. Like, it's not the same, is it? Post death of a salesman, we all go to do players in the park.
Death of a salesman. You just have to go get a drink after that.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, everybody.
Not an orange peel. I mean,
oh man. But yeah. But yes, so that's kind of my whole deal, and I always really love to hear, especially people who are classically trained, if any, you know, if that's been part of their training, if that's been part of what they've learned, or if you just do it. And for a lot of actors that I've talked to, they're like, man, that's a word that I just, you know, I think I've heard it before. I think I skipped it on purpose. And it makes sense, though, because really, it's almost like what you were talking about in terms of learning all the pieces of things versus just learning how to deal with yourself. Like they taught you, you know, in London, okay, we're going to go deal with you and how you would react to this.
Yeah.
And so with it, it's important. I think mimesis is very important, but it's not important to the actors. It's not important even to the audience to know about. What's important is what happens in a theater. You know, what happens, especially like you said, maybe more specifically within Shakespearean works than some other ones.
Yeah.
I'm never going to get that thought out of my head. Here, see this, and then come register to vote. What?
What? There's something about it that just doesn't quite make sense as much. Anyways, but yes, there's a company, and I'm sure you know very well, in Virginia, that I like to consider my personal grad school. I didn't go to grad school. I had equivalent experience, I would like to think, or who knows. Was doing a contract at American Shakespeare Center. Yes, that is where I learned the true power, because I had lots of teachers who taught the power of original practices, but that's where I learned the true power of the original practices and the music and all that. That's where I got my grad school training, I like to consider it.
Did you ever meet Matthew Davies?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I talked to him, and I saw him perform in New Jersey a while back, and he actually played in As You Like It, and he was Touchstone and he was Adam, which was a very
spicy.
I was like, but we talked about it too, and he was like, mimesis. That's a term that just gives me a headache. I was like, that is also fair.
So my first, it was one of my first like contracts out of school, and my first play that I did there was As You Like It. As You Like It will always have a spot in my heart, and it was also an equally good production, successful. It was different because it was a touring production, so it was different, but we had to be able to mold, shift it around. This one that now is definitely for that space, for that particular time and space. But yeah, it's very interesting to see just how you can take the same text and make it so wildly different, as seeing so many as yous. It's as you season, right?
Yes, it is as you season.
It is as you season.
So in terms of Shakespeare, and because this is the Shakespearean Shrew, we've already talked a little bit about education, so I'm guessing you probably had a similar experience with Shakespeare, maybe your freshman year of high school or something, where you had to read Shakespeare, or did you have one of those? What was your first experience?
Well, actually...
Or was it in the shed? Because that'd be cool.
Yeah, kind of. The thing is, I went to an arts high school. I went to Locks. I went to Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. So we had like grad school level teachers destroying our 14-year-old minds, blowing our minds.
That explains so much.
Yeah, already. And there's nothing like he wrote on one of our teachers, his name is Paul Bamer, went to Delaware, like this powerful actor. Like one of the first days I'll never forget, when he was trying to explain to us the power of transformational language and speaking, and he wrote all of King Lear's like howl, 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 oh you are men of stone speech, and he like melted our faces with it, and we were like and like, so I went to like regular English class after that, what I got was, and we were literally reading Romeo and Juliet, as you said, what I got was, oh my God, what we're doing right now is not what we are supposed to learn, Jake.
So you really got to see the best way to do it and
the worst way to do it. Yeah, just kids dying and falling asleep, and like yeah, they hated their lives, and
Yes.
and then like and we go to your arts class, and you're like, oh, and like you get your juices up, and you're like, okay, this is it, this is what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so last question. So favorite, so you can either do one or all three, but favorite Shakespeare play, line, or character?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry, I need a minute.
No, it's a hard one.
Oh my gosh. Favorite Shakespeare play, favorite Shakespeare line, favorite Shakespeare character. My favorite character, for some reason, I don't know why, and maybe it's toxic, but it's not. I don't know. But I something about Othello and the tragedy of Othello and his journey and his terrible mistake and is has always, I don't know why I identify with it, and I like him. I mean, I don't like him for what he, yeah,
Yeah, okay, I got you.
yeah,
No, he's a great character.
yeah, yeah. For some reason I really love it. So maybe my quote could be one that loved not wisely but too well.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And so yeah, boo, Iago, boo. But speaking of outsiders, like an outsider who's an insider with the audience, but also a villain. I mean, that's even for our modern, like that's pushing the envelope. That's cool
Well,
stuff.
even Macbeth, he keeps talking to the audience, and he's like, "I think I got to do this," and he's like, you're eye to eye with him, and you're like, "No, don't do it, man, don't do it." And you're just like, and it's interesting because again, like you said, the outsider makes you as an audience feel like an insider with him in some of Shakespeare's plays. And
You're
like,
an
oh, no.
insider with the outsider but that kind of removes you from the inside. It's like he's doing what the work with language that a camera does for movies, which is
Yes.
just
Amazing.
it's still to this day, it's never not gonna be brilliant.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And
All
when
right.
yeah, sorry, yeah,
No. You're fine. I just didn't want to take up too much of your time today because I could keep talking forever.
me too.
But I do want to hear, so we'll have to do this again.
Yeah.
But I do want to hear about your podcast so that some
Oh.
of my Shrewniverse can maybe go check out your podcast because it sounds cool. And
Oh.
any upcoming projects you might have so that all of my LA Shrewniverse people can go check them out if you have any upcoming ones.
Yeah, so my in my other life, so besides acting and music stuff, I'm also kind of a horror and sci-fi junkie, Twilight Zone. So during the pandemic, I said, you know what? I listened to some of my favorite horror podcasts. There's this guy who writes this one called Knife Point Horror, named Soren Narnia. By the way, Shrewniverse, if you're into that kind of stuff, he's the best of the best writer. His podcast is unbelievable. So I listened to it and I was like, I bet you I can do that. Writing has kind of been another passion of mine. So I just did it. I wrote it, and I make music. As you know, I make music. I made my own original music, and I made Nightscape by Daniel DeYoung, and
That's awesome.
yeah. And a couple of them have, I hired actors, and we did like scripts, like a radio play almost. But it's all horror, like kind of Lovecraftian horror. That's like my.
Can't wait to go listen to it. This is what I'm going to be listening to now.
Yeah, yeah. The first one's definitely a raw. It's actually about this structure I'm in right now. It's a barn from the 20s, which is haunted in real life. So I just took that and extrapolated on it.
Now I'm like, for our next episode, I might need a tour of the barn.
Yeah, it's welcome. As far as upcoming projects, I didn't really have an audition, haven't scheduled anything for myself. I have a nice family. I need to have a kid. I need to focus. right now. It takes a lot of time.
I was going to say, it must be a hard balance
It
between
is.
everything.
Yeah, especially when all your nights are gone. All your nights are gone, and there's no bedtime. And you're just like, well, and my wife's also an actress, so you're like, well, I guess it's my turn. I'm like, okay, you get to work, and then so my next plan is take a month off and reconnect with my family.
That sounds like a great project. Great plan. I like it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you and to pick your brain about all of this. And I have so many insights, and I can't wait to go back and listen to it all over again. But again, thank you so much. And I hope the last few nights of the show go as brilliantly as the show I got to see.
Oh, that's very sweet. Karen is such a doctor.
Oh, really? Karen is fine. Shrew, Karen, whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. It's such a pleasure to meet you in person and digitally, and now I can't wait to listen to your podcast in general, though.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Trading podcasts.
Yay.
All right. Well, for all of my people in the Shrew-niverse, I just want to say thank you for listening. And again, please let me know if you have any questions, any things you want to hear about. It has been a pleasure. And just remember, all the world's a stage, and you too can be a shrew.